Okay, so this week in our webinar series, we're going to be introducing an SAP connection into Carbonmark. So this really allows enterprise organizations that have their ERP or other business process management software on SAP to access and source carbon programmatically using their carbon accounting tools from Carbonmark. And under the hood, the payment processor is powered by Provide Payments. So to get started today, we'll just do a quick round of introductions. My name is Ellul. I'm the head of solutions at Carbonmark.
And I'm Ryan. I'm the developer relations and SAP architect at Provide. Really excited to be sharing more about Carbonmark and our SAP integration with you today.
Great. So in terms of the agenda for this, for the webinar, we're going to start with a primer on Carbonmark and what we offer. We're going to touch upon the emissions tracking imperative that corporations have and the downstream effects that this has. Also, how our solution is positioned to assist with these types of problems that we need to solve. We're also going to do a little bit of a deep dive on how simple it is to actually connect Carbonmark to SAP data and how the really the carbon accounting in SAP is solved using the Green Ledger technology out of the box. And we're going to show two different touch points within the SAP environment that we can get started with immediately. One being for travel data and flights through the Concur tool. And then we can also show some shipping and logistics use cases via the S/4HANA tool. We're going to do a demo of the flight offsetting, and then we're going to move to a recap on how to get started, how to onboard, and future webinars that we are running in this space. So to start with, I want to, for those that aren't familiar watching this, introduce Carbonmark. So we're the most innovative provider of climate solutions in the sense that we're adopting next generation payments infrastructure to improve the traceability, transparency, and accessibility of the carbon markets. And we offer a number of different solutions for our clients, one being CO2 compensation, this being the key component of the outcome that we drive, being the decarbonization of our clients' business operations. We also finance project development. So for projects that are creating positive environmental impact, we are actually a financier of those projects as well as an ancillary to the CEO compensation. Some of those projects involve green energy as well. So we're also focused on environmental technologies as well. Today, though, we're going to be talking about how we plug all of these three things together with our digital solutions, which is the software-enabled next-generation infrastructure that allows some world firsts and solves some problems that haven't been solved prior to our delivery of these solutions into the market. The key problem is that the largest companies in the world are responsible for an enormous amount of the CO2 emissions that are having a negative impact on our biosphere and contributing to the global increase in temperature that we're wanting to manage. And we know that an approach of reducing our emissions and decarbonizing is the way to get there. And through a lot of treaties such as the Paris Agreement and international law, many of the companies, 62% of the Fortune 500 companies, are headquartered in a country where net zero is actually targets are actually legally binding. So as a component of the net zero journey, the augmentation of their business operations to reduce emissions is critical. And there's also a requirement for where it's difficult or impossible to completely remove emissions, to use a last mile solution such as carbon removals. So with that in mind, we really are focused on solving this problem, specifically what we call Scope 3 emissions. So as these directives are essentially being placed on large organizations to decarbonize their business operations, there is also pressure being moved through the business network and supply chains that are attached to these organizations as well, being the upstream activities such as business travel. There's a number of other things there. We also have, the indirect components as well, such as the transportation and distribution, and lease assets and things like that. So as a result of this top-down push to decarbonize, it becomes a network effect where organizations transacting with certain organizations fall under the scope 3 emissions of that organization and have to comply with this. So our view is that what can be measured can be managed, and specifically the first step is understanding what is the business emissions from the operations of these organizations in the first place, as it pertains to scope 3, for instance. This is really where the Carbonmark offsetting API comes into play. So there are a number of common business systems such as SAP S/4HANA for supply chain emissions and management. SAP S/4HANA being a supply chain management tool, but based off of the data generated in that supply chain management tool, we also have emissions data, and we'll touch upon how that works and how it's already exists out of the box. And we also have a more cloud-friendly SaaS component to the business cloud of SAP, being the Concur tool, which manages all the hotel visits and flights and business travel. And of course, within that solution is all of the travel emissions data as well. So what the Carbonmark offsetting API does is it essentially intelligently reads the business data as it pertains to emissions data inside of the organization, and then it makes real-time requests to our carbon marketplace to source high-quality carbon offsets and removals. And then in real time, with the ability to do sub-1 ton fractional offsets, is able to provide a clear and concise audit trail to business stakeholders to actually verify and provide verification of the offsetting or removal of those negative externalities in the form of carbon emissions. And that's really what we're going to explore today in more depth as it pertains to the SAP system. So what makes all of this come alive inside of SAP is a solution that is native to SAP called Green Ledger. And what this is it is an extensive data set within SAP that can be tied to specific supply chain events, flights, hotel stays, things like that, which allow the SAP system to intelligently understand what the emissions associated to that business process are. And this Green Ledger component of the SAP environment is really the key touch point with Carbonmark, where we are able to intelligently understand the precise requirements, whether it be kilograms or tons of emissions that we want to remediate in real time.
Yeah, and a few more remarks about this. SAP has done an extraordinary job in their commitment to sustainability with a product portfolio in the cloud, with sustainability footprint management and the control tower and others. Really a visionary thing that's happening today in terms of bringing the raw data, like the supply chain data, everything that would normally go back into emissions factor to get emissions calculation. Now we're moving towards a model where the carbon emissions accounting has the same level of precision as the financial accounting does, right? And you see this often today, even with many corporations side by side their financial report, which they generate from their SAP like finance and supply chain data. Right next to it is a sustainability report, right? That breaks down what their emissions impact are, but also things like their impact on the sustainable development goals. So there's a couple of videos that are linked there, but if you check out the latest on SAP Green Ledger, there's a lot of really cool things to discover in terms of what the whole SAP ecosystem is moving towards.
Great, thanks for that, Ryan. And we'll include in the show notes that we'll send out to attendees this slide deck, and inside of it will be links that you can click to learn more, such as these. So there are really two ways that we connect the emissions data tracking with offsetting. So as we mentioned, there is the supply chain and logistics solution, S/4HANA, and we also have the travel data being in the cloud offering of SAP. So one being a more business critical system that we can still access, without any risk to the actual operational processes, that data. And then we also have a plug and play model with the travel data. So with that, we're really going to be double clicking on that travel data component today. And Ryan has prepared a demonstration of accessing some of this flight data and doing real-time offsets with the Carbonmark API. So I'm just going to stop sharing screen and hand it over to Ryan to show a live demo of this working inside of an SAP environment.
Perfect. So I have this sample flights data offsetting app up and running in my SAP environment here. And this is a set of flight data, right? So this would be the emissions per seat on the flight, and what kind of carbon retirement may correspond to these activities. So let's say I'm doing some corporate travel and I booked it through Concur, and then I offset it, right? I would receive for that offset a certificate. We can just load one of these up. A certificate like this, right? That gives this incredible transparency in terms of, what kind of remedial action was taking place, for my emissions of this flight. We think about flights in particular because the emissions are very easy to calculate for businesses, right? In terms of your destination and where you left from, round trip. It's very easy to get the emissions data there. But this can apply also to any and all other things, right? Through the tools that integrated to this front end.
And it's worth mentioning as well that with the carbon marketplace, essentially, as you can see, the carbon ton of emissions associated with these flights is typically less than 1 ton. So all of the fractionality for complete matching of emissions with the actual carbon retirement itself is a feature that we have out of the box. So there's no need to round up to specific amounts or do batches. This process can just hum around in the background once the projects that you're wanting to utilize and for the offsetting or removal have been selected. This business process will do per transaction level offsetting within any type of business process associated with emissions, powered by that Green Ledger corporate data.
Yeah, and I would say too, what's also really innovative for SAP users, like this can be some of the SAP users' first exposure to blockchains, but we make it a very safe, easy, effective integration, whereby you are billed in simple banking invoice terms, but still getting this, extraordinary hardening of the data with the immutable nature of reporting of this data, so that you can demonstrate to your business partners, very clearly in terms of what your carbon retirements are. I'll add on to this, right? This is an application that is, and I'll show code very quickly, written in ABAP, but we have which is the native language inside of S/4HANA, but we always have the option as well to go through a very cloud native type of tool like a Postman or Node.js on SAP BTP. That's how we will integrate to Concur and many other solutions across SAP BTP, whether it's CRM, supply chain, uh, Concur. All of those will be able to be integrated, across um, from the SAP ecosystem to Carbonmark in that same way. So there's a number of great resources in the um, uh, in the Carbonmark repos, and provide has a API resource hub that walks through entirely how to set up this application in an SAP environment, but also how to do that more boilerplate, like cloud native uh, API-led type of integration between the systems to do this offsetting.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing that with us, Ryan, and making it real for everyone. I'm just gonna.
So there's another timer there.
Oh, I'm just flicking over. Oh, sorry, Ryan. I didn't know that you're still going with your demo. Do you want me to hand back over?
You can go forward from here. I don't have much else to share, but if there's other questions in the chat, I'll be happy to answer later.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. So really, the next steps here is if you're a user of SAP and you've got these tools implemented in your business processes, the next question is how can I get this set up and start testing this solution? And it's really straightforward. I mean, the first step here is connecting the API via the resources documentation that Ryan discussed with your SAP environment. It's quite plug and play. Then you need to register an account to essentially so that the API can essentially scale out, and there'll be limits placed on that. And then third, you're able to then test retirements through your application in the way that Ryan showed per transaction, and then move that into a programmatic offsetting as well. And then the billing exists every 30 days in arrears, or up to 90 days, depending on pre-approval from Provide. And then that's really it. It's as easy as that to get started. And really, before setting up billing, you can test just with 1 ton free on us. So you can do microtransactions to test that in a sandbox environment, for instance. So it's a very straightforward process of just connecting with the boilerplate code, registering for an account so that you can get your keys for the API, to giving it a test, and then enabling billing on that API. So it's a really slick and straightforward process there. So really, this is the call to action component before we go to Q&A of the webinar, where we would say just to reach out. Here are my details. I'd encourage you to book a call with me, and if you'd like to discuss this, if you have a client that you think might benefit from having a conversation around doing a pilot of something like this in their environment, we would love to help you in any way that we can. And we'd also encourage you, after we do an installation, or if you go and have a play around with the code, we'd love to show your solution as well, and co-market your integration to our audience. So that's really the call to action component. I think with that, we can probably hand over to Q&A before we essentially wrap things up and share what else we have planned. Right.
So this So this
Oh,
question, how does Carbonmark's API help with carbon accounting? What I would say, the way in which uh, it helps is, often companies don't have a lot of certainty of whether or not their carbon emissions data is correct, right? And when we introduce these carbon retirements, into the public view, when companies can coordinate and synchronize their data through that, they they get a better understanding of those scope 3 emissions, right? To say, like, I verified with my business partner that the emissions of this that were offset were this, right? So that's kind of a wrinkle to why even do these micro offsets, because think about what does it potentially mean to have a net zero purchase order or delivery item or flight. Yeah. Liam, any other extra thoughts there?
yeah, I think it helps with the carbon accounting process. I mean, indirectly, really. I mean, I would kind of see it as like a credits and debits system in a way, in terms of just understanding where you want to target your offsets and removals within your operations as well, and just being able to tie specific events with specific projects on how you're actually doing that carbon accounting um,
Yeah.
System. So what do you mean by a zero commission pricing model? Yeah, so Andrew, in terms of the business model of Carbonmark is a carbon broker. So it's a marketplace where a lot of the supply that we hold is available for purchasing and things like that. So essentially, with zero at the moment, we offer zero commission, which just means that we don't add a markup to the spot price. And the reason that we do that is that we are essentially stimulating demand for that marketplace. So also, if you were to go into Carbonmark and list a project yourself, we would not charge a fee or commission on the transfer and sale at this point in time. So that's really what a zero commission model means right now. Is we're in the early stages of growing the platform. So as a result of that, we're offering a competitive offering to our clients.
What I would make sure to make very clear is that for provide as the payments processor and API technology and enabler, there is a small service fee or charge, based on dollar volume. But the fact that that the rest of Carbonmark has that zero commission trading model means that there's a lot of savings that get passed on, uh, to these corporate users that are seeking to use this overall. And yeah, that's a remarkable thing. Very price competitive overall, and some automation benefits in terms of doing this, through Carbonmark versus other sources where you possibly do carbon retirements.
Right. So we might just oh, here we go. Is it
In,
possible to set preferred projects for automated offsetting? Yes, absolutely.
Indeed.
Yep. So when you set up the API, you can essentially select the types of projects that are available within Carbonmark. So you can actually select, you can go into Carbonmark, find a project that you want that has available supply, and you can essentially say, I want this to be the preferred project for the automated offsetting. Yep, it's absolutely right.
So there's another question here that was asked. I saw, um, the Concur demo, can you elaborate on the real-time compensation process and how it aligns with the data collected from employee travel? Yeah, when for this, when you book or approve travel with Concur, of course, there's a a destination and departing city of your entire trip round trip. So there's emissions data from your flight that can be calculated from that rather easily. Using data sources like S4HANA, or in this case BTP, that would have more of the the API connectivity to Concur. We can get to that that emissions data based on the destination, et cetera, and integrate this API, whether we're doing it through S4 natively like I showed, or in the cloud as well. Uh, would say that this works across many other enterprise systems as well, across different middleware systems. Anywhere you think you can find data that has emissions data to it, that's similar to an SAP, you could do this offsetting there as well. And on the real-time compensation process, what's really happening under the hood is the enterprise system, like as the API, it'll pay USDC to do the carbon retirements, but the companies using this API never have to hold any digital asset, right? They're simply invoiced in arrears for their usage of the API.
Right. Cool. Well, I think that's we're just wrapping up on time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're keeping these webinars to like nice 30-minute bites, and we'll
Yep.
have it recorded as well for you to review. But I guess we'll just plug the final, the next sort of webinar that we have, which is Demystifying Digital Carbon. So a good segue from Ryan's discussion there on digital assets. So talk a little bit around what digital carbon is, how you can trace it, why it has benefits for fractional capabilities, and public auditability as well. So there'll be an email going out to sign up to that webinar as well, and there'll be a link to it here in the show notes. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining and for asking questions. And as mentioned, my details are all here. So yeah, encourage you to reach out, but I'll also include a link to book appointments after the call as well. So thanks so much, everyone, and have a great afternoon or morning wherever you're dialing in from today.